to get our building up and running in a really good way would be an opportunity for us to continue. As I have shared, just the vision came into my head as being a beacon of God's love here in the southeast corner. But like all of us, we tend to age and we tend to get cracks and crunks, and we hurt here and we shift there, and that's what our building has done. So this possibility of a capital campaign will guide us forward in doing what we can to continue to being that light and that love that God calls us to be. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you and let you know. Yeah, that's what I was told. Okay, yeah. For those of you who are watching on Zoom, Aurora says the chat is open, so if you will post your question in the chat, she will convey that up to us so that we can answer that question. So, all righty, let's carry on.
So the way this is going to work today is we're going to play the Zoom meeting that we attended, so you can have the full sense of what occurred. And then afterwards, those that attended that meeting will stay to answer any questions you might have and to talk about next steps, okay? All right, so Rich, it's yours.
The willingness and readiness to perhaps take on a capital campaign to deal with some deferred maintenance, capital maintenance items, primarily the heat and air conditioning in one part of your building. When we were there for the first impressions gathering, I thought that was your best tool to let people experience why it was so important to invest in new heating and air conditioning when there was no heat, and it was very cold in Albuquerque that day. So I went through and did a lot of financial analysis over the last 5 years. In addition to that, I looked at some trends, some best practices, and then there was an online anonymous survey that we conducted, and I want to thank everyone for those of you who participated in it. I had some personal conversations with a few people, and then other people accessed the online survey, and then also paper surveys that were then sent to my office to compile. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through the report, and we'll talk about what happens next after that. So, okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Wait a minute. I was trying to get my memos to go away, and I wound up clicking out of that link. All right. So, the first thing that I want to show you is a giving analysis, and I'll tell you why I do this in just a moment. These giving, actually, it was 2024 giving ranges, so that's one little thing that needs to be corrected. You look at something a million times and you don't see something, and this is proofread by 2 people in our office. Oh well. So what this shows are, for the last 3 years, I was looking for the number of pledging households, amount given, the total giving units, and average worship attendance. And what you can see is that, if you're looking at incremental changes, the amount given is within that incremental change over 3 years, as is the total giving units. The average worship attendance had a spike in 23, but is kind of leveling out and is still ahead of 2022. But the most impressive thing that I saw in this is that in 2022, there were no pledging households. This is all from data that you guys gave me. In 2023, you had 21 but in 2024 you had 34, and that's quite an impressive increase on that. Now, if you'll pay attention, whoops, I went too far. If you'll pay attention to this pie chart, this shows the giving ranges and what percentage you guys received in specific giving bands. And why I do this is that I want you to see in what giving band, if you will, the majority of your income comes from. And you can see that the largest piece of the pie, 43%, was given between 5,000 and 10,000. But not too far behind that, 34%, 10,000 to 25,000, and then 19% between 1,000 and 5,000. The reason that this is so important, and it's good to see how this is all playing out, because you want to make sure that you have a nice spread of your income in different income strata, if you will, or different giving strata, because you want to make sure that you don't have, particularly in the higher end, like the 10 to 25, you want to make sure that there is sufficient giving in the other areas of the giving strata, so that if something happens to this particular piece of the pie, if you will, if someone passes away or their circumstances change, you want to make sure that that's not going to be a really difficult thing for the church to overcome. But with this balance, I think that it looks quite balanced. And this is also in keeping with other churches your size, or even not your size, just the giving strata and the way that is portioned out. So first of all,
Norma,
yes.
Can I ask a quick question before we
Sure.
move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
That pie chart, does that represent a single year or the cumulative of the 3 years, or is that just 24?
No, that's 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now I'm going to start with the survey questions. I asked, how long have you attended Christ UMC? And I have that slide going, and I'm also looking at my iPad. So, okay. So what this shows is that 87% of the people who responded, they have been in attendance at Christ for over 5 years. You also have 8% who have been there between less than a year, and then 3 to 5 years have represent 5% of the people who responded. And so obviously this shows that 87% of the respondents have attended for over 5 years, and what this represents is the institutional history of the church. And so this is a very important segment. It also shows that people who find their home, their spiritual home at Christ, apparently stay. But it's also encouraging, I think, that 13% of the respondents have been attending for less than 5 years. And so that makes it more diverse in your congregation, perhaps, based on age or experience or faith background. This is very, in United Methodist churches, this is very common as well. Okay, so I always want to ask the question about alignment. I want to make sure that the project that is being proposed, people feel like it's in alignment with what the church is being called to do. So I asked the question, do you feel like it's the next right step for Christ? And this was really great, I think, because it shows that 94% of the people who responded feel like that this project is consistent with the next right step for Christ. And there were 6% who did not feel like that was the case. And oh shoot, give me just a second. I clicked out of what I needed to be in. I don't like to rely on my memory. So that 6% represented, I can tell you the exact number, that was two respondents felt like it wasn't the next right step for Christ UMC. There were no comments that accompanied that, but it is, I always look to see if there is anyone who says definitely not, because if that's a large portion of the respondents saying no or definitely no, then that's a problem. But 94%, that's a positive indicator there. And even in the interviews that I had in the first impressions gathering, there were no obvious definite oppositions to whether or not this was the next right step for you. So some of the comments, and I'm just going, again, they're anonymous, so I don't know who said them. Let's do it. Another one said, it will enable us to help more people and possibly create income renting space. That's a very interesting thought, and I have some contacts with a company that might be able to help you with that. Said, God is moving. We need heat and air conditioning for ourselves, let alone for attracting other activities. And then it says, I am a yes only if people are willing to stand up to encourage the ministries that could be in our building. And another one said, mostly yes, with an aging church congregation, and very few young families. I know we can improve with the new air conditioning and heating the entire church. And then also said that they hoped that they could incorporate some solar energy. And I would imagine that in Albuquerque, that's probably a big player. All right, the next question I asked, I always want to find out about leadership. Because if we show negative support of leadership, then that could be a red flag. And so I ask about 3 different segments: pastor, staff, and non-staff leaders. And you can see the responses there. They're all kind of right in that 63% range. We want to see this at least 50% positive, and so you guys did that. The other thing that I want to see is, the numbers that are unsure, and that is represented by the. Let me see which one that is. That is represented by the green bar, and what some of the comments were, they just don't know who those non-staff leaders are, who the lay leaders are. And your pastor's been there a relatively short period of time. And then also I know that when this survey was active, you were just bringing on board a new administrative person. It says, some of the comments, wait a minute, yeah. It says, our staff is mostly new and not as invested in our church or our members. Everybody has something to offer in life. And then I love this one, because we are confident, because we believe. And then, a couple of them talk about the new administrative position. Church members have been in place for 20, 30, and 40 plus years. Everybody has done leadership in various committees and ministries multiple times. Our pastor is very experienced. And, just mostly like that. Have no program staff. So, but anyway, that's what I look for, is at least 50% positive. And then my iPad keeps going to sleep. I'm sorry. because I want to be able to give you these, I want to be able to give you these remarks, and that's where I put them. All right, the next question, I asked the question, would you be willing to work, if asked, in a well-defined and limited role in a future capital campaign if the role did not involve directly asking persons for money? 40% said yes, 41% were unsure, and then 19% said no. And, you know, we want to see at least 33% of the respondents say that they would be willing to work in a campaign. Now, all this shows is that people are thinking about it and how committed they might be to making sure that a capital campaign is successful. So if we're looking for at least 33%, you guys exceeded that by 40%. And, you know, and that was even without knowing what it might entail. And so that's positive. Again, this is pretty typical of all churches that I work with. And the main thing about the unsure is, you know, they're unsure, what do you want me to do? And, you know, I would probably be a little reticent to just, you know, say, sure, whatever. All right, I ask about momentum. In your opinion, for the last 12 months, have you felt your church was going backwards, moving forward, or holding steady? And you know, truthfully, this tends to be a very emotional question for a church, because every church would like to be, you know, think that 100% of the people are engaged and you're moving forward. Reality is that's not reality. But what you have here is that you have about 59%, 60% who feel like that you're either holding steady or moving forward. That's a positive. 41% said that it's moving backwards. That 41% is what we would be the most concerned with in trying to bring those people on board if you decide to go forward with a capital campaign. Because what you tend to see in capital campaigns is that it's really a church-wide endeavor, and it has an impact that can bring the congregation together in a more structured way, or not even structured way, but everybody pointing in the same direction, if you will. This does represent, I think, though, that there is sufficient unity and momentum to succeed in conducting a capital campaign. So let me share with you some comments. All we are doing is having worship services, nothing to build a loving family congregation. I see some evidence of improvement. Poor attendance and aging members. However, there has been recent encouragement as 12 children came forward for the children's sermon recently. Well, that's pretty good. Circumstances generally beyond the control of the congregation have seemingly driven the backwards movement. It's a toss-up between holding steady and going backwards. We've lost some key people. You know, just on like that. All right, this next one is a really interesting one, and I'm interested in you guys seeing this. Confidentially, if you were completing a pledge card for a capital campaign today, what range of giving might you consider for a 3-year total commitment over and above your commitment to the annual budget? You see how all of these have generated. Someone indicated that they are considering giving between $100,000 and $150,000. You have 5 families who are already considering giving between $25,000 and $50,000. 2 families between $10,000 and $25,000. 8 between $5,000 and $10,000, and then less than 5, you have 6. So that was I was anxious to see what this was going to show. even at this early stage, some families are considering what I consider to be significant pledges. But for it to reach its full potential, any capital campaign would need to make sure that additional major commitments, if you will, could be identified. So the next question. Might you
Norma, I
give?
have another question.
Sure, Ellen.
This is Ellen. What does that mean? Major contributions could be identified.
Well, if right now, this, I would want to see, well, and I've got a graph, later on in the presentation that'll probably be more helpful than this, but just to, you want to see if you can, in this less than 5,000, some of the comments were, they were planning on giving, they were sure they would give a pledge, but they just hadn't thought about what that might be. And so part of the process is to identify what might be in that range, and then also if there are any others in these two ranges.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I asked this question about non-cash gifts for a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of times people, when they are considering a pledge to a campaign, they're thinking money in their checking account, if you will. And I've had a lot of people who have said over the years, oh, appreciated assets, I can, I've got stock that I'm happy to donate and it's appreciated, and things like that. And so part of the reason for this question is just to get people to engage in thinking, outside of their checking account. But also we want to make sure that we have sufficient information in place for people who might be considering that. And especially if they do have appreciated stocks, is the church equipped to take those proceeds? Okay. Age range. This is very typical of a United Methodist Church. You have 51% between 65 and 80. You had 38% over 80, 8% between 50 and 64, and then 3% 35 to 49. And the reason that this is important, because first of all, it provides a glimpse of what your ministry context is and can be used to consider what ministries are we offering in each of these age segments. The 65 to 80 group is probably, and the over 80, they are probably, at retirement or in retirement, and they typically give out of their accumulated wealth, if you will. The 50 to 64 are people who are usually at the top of their earning capacity, and so that is 8%. That's not bad. The 35 to 49, they probably still have student loans. They're having babies, whatever, and so that's typically not an indication of the resources to make a major gift to a capital campaign. Okay, so let me click out of this. So what I want to share with you is that we have in the full report, and I'm going to send the full report out to probably Adrian and Ellen. And then, I'm going to also have an executive summary that has all of this that can be sent out to everyone. If you try to send out the entire report, it's quite a large file. But in the report, we talk about that there are some things that are important to have a successful campaign. And one of them is clarity of vision and leadership, that the congregation is aligned with what this project is and how it's going to impact Impact Christ UMC. The other thing is that you want to make sure that you are increasing the number of generous Christ UMC families, because capital campaigns don't just impact generosity for that one period in time, but can also impact generosity overall to the church. And then finally, the thing that I want you to realize is that we use the model of 1 Chronicles 29. When David went, he was building the temple, gathering resources to build the temple, and he went to the leaders and he asked the leaders to lead, and they did. The leaders led, and the people followed, and the temple was built. So that's why we want to make sure that lead gifts are identified early on, because that very likely always determines the entire capacity of, or the expectation of, what a capital campaign could raise in 3 years. So with all of that, what I am seeing is that if you guys decided to do a capital campaign with the information that was surfaced in this survey, and with looking at the financial data, you could probably raise anywhere between $300,000 and $425,000, and that's looking at the probably the midpoint of all of that. I know that the stated desire of the project was $500,000, and so that's what I wanted to talk about with Ellen. Based on those gifts that were identified, that represents almost 84% of $500,000. So there is all kinds of possibilities that you could reach that 500,000. Is going to, I have seen the Holy Spirit work in mighty powerful ways that I never thought would be possible. But that's going to depend on the people who are guiding the campaign. The relationship between everyone within the church, leaders and parishioners. And so, Ellen, what I wanted to share with you is that in our experience, we've been around since 1992, and helped churches and nonprofits raise billions of dollars. So we've got a lot of data. And so, for a church to raise $500,000, one of the things that in this giving chart, one of the things, and you know what? Let me see if I can pull that up real fast so you can see it. Give me 1 minute to go through all my slides.
Well, while you're looking, Norma, I would just like to clarify for everybody on the call that the 500,000 was sort of a compromise number between what the trustees, the capital improvement plan, the trustees had put together, which doesn't include everything that could really be done to our facility. And we're not talking about tearing down and rebuilding. We're just talking about rehabilitating and repairing and in some places upgrading. But between that number from the trustees, which was around 200,000, to Adrienne had led a conversation with a small handful of people. I don't know exactly who they were, and they had thrown out the number 2 million, and that seemed extreme to me, at least, and so we sort of settled on 500,000 as the proposed amount to put out with this feasibility study. So I just wanted to clarify where that number came from for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Ellen. All right, so this chart, based on our experience, a campaign that is raising $500,000, it would need one gift of between 100 and 150, and one one is presenting itself. You would need one between 50 and 100, and there's not one yet appearing. You would need 4 between 30 and 50, and we saw 5 were lifted up in this survey. 9 between 10 and 30, and 2 are present. 12 between 5 and 10, and 8 are present, and 26 less than 5,006 are showing. So that's a pretty healthy representation. So the first thing that we do is we lead a lead gift component, and then we design the campaign based on the amount that those lead gifts are indicating that they are going to give. And then all of this is in the report. You know, you need to increase the buy-in and understanding beyond the committed core of the church. And probably those of you who are on this call are part of that committed core of the church. You want to make sure there's clarity and commitment from the church leadership, and that it's a partnership between leadership and the church. You want to make sure that we have that lead gifts emphasis, raise enthusiasm for participation in the campaign. And the reason that, you know, I asked the question about would you be willing to work, what we find is that if people have some kind of touch in the campaign execution, over 90% of them will make a pledge. And that's anything from helping stuff envelopes on a Tuesday morning to, you know, leading one of the components of the capital campaign. So we try to go as wide and deep in the congregation because you want to make sure you have buy-in. Good, abundance, clear communication in all forms is essential. And then finally, God will not call people to give sacrificially to simply pay for facilities. It's always in response to God's vision to reach people through life-changing experiences. So that, my friends, is the report. I'm happy to take questions, or I can send this to you and we can have another conversation later. What the next steps are, I was going to look at that. I think you guys have in your contract, you have 30 days to reflect and decide whether or not you want to move forward with a capital campaign. And if you decide to move forward with the capital campaign, then, you know, the planning of that would come after that. And then if you decide that this isn't the time, then that's, you know, then that's you have that option in the contract. You have all the positive indicators that I look for. And so from looking at the data and with the conversations, with the surveys, that's showing that. But that's kind of like a one-dimensional situation. I don't see, you know, I can't see and know beyond that one-dimensional data of what's behind that. And so that's part of the discernment that you guys will need to be making to determine, is this really the next best step for Christ UMC?
Norma, I have a question. This is Ellen again.
Yeah. And Ellen, thank you so much for asking questions.
If we were to move forward, if we were to decide to move forward, which is still a big if, what would the role of Horizons look like? Like, so I'll just be really, really honest. Even in the feasibility study, I think in my head, when we thought about engaging an outside organization to help us with the capital campaign, and I say help us, but I really mean lead a capital campaign on our behalf if we decided to do that. I really didn't envision us. I don't know what I envisioned us doing. But I felt like we hit delays and stuff because we didn't have the time and capacity to get right on things. And I felt like one of the things I took away from this feasibility study is if we were to decide to move forward, it would have to be a priority, which is hard to do because those of us who are sort of that, what you call the committed core, are
Yeah.
pretty maxed out.
Sure.
And so, but momentum seemed important. Like I started to realize that momentum really mattered, especially with the
Yes.
survey.
Right.
And,
Right.
and so I'm wondering, like, sort of what would be required of us if we were to move forward, and what would Horizons do to be coming in and doing?
Sure. Um, so it's the so in a nutshell, um, I am the one who will be uh, helping move that forward. I will sit in on every meeting, with every discussion. I will help. I will help identify the teams. I will do all the training for the teams and the planning, and provide examples of various aspects of the campaign. And so that part of what we want the church to see as well. It's one thing for someone to come in from the outside and say, okay, do this, do this, do this. What we try to do is work with those people to empower them to see that they can have a part in moving the church forward. And so, the team that we would want to put together would be, it varies based on the scope of the campaign and the size of the church. Maybe 8 to 9 people, and they would help guide the campaign through the process. And and then at the end of the campaign, for the 3 years that represent the pledge payout, I'm working with that team throughout that entire 3 years to help them put together presentations and reports to give to the church about how much money has been raised, what the money has been used for, and that kind of thing. Does that help, Ellen?
That does help. It does help.
I mean, I don't just give you okay, look at this YouTube and you do it, like my husband tries to do with Fix It projects. And having to do something like that with the capital campaign is probably just the same as when my husband tried to change out a particular faucet. So I'll just leave it at that. He can't
Okay.
hear me, so.
One of the things that
Okay, so the meeting went into the minutiae of contracts and things like that. But what you heard, can you hear me now? What you heard was Norma describing the results of the survey and what the capital campaign would look like. Some interesting numbers in that survey. You have the items in front of you. If you go back to the original number that showed 3% making a $100,000 contribution. No. On page 9. So I took, that was based on the survey and it was like a cold call. Nobody had any sense of what the purpose of the question, or had any time to think about it, perhaps. And I took an opportunity to add the numbers up. If those people who said that they were going to contribute on that graph did so at the least number possible for that price range, it comes to $340,000. Norma took the mid-range, halfway between 100 and 150, or halfway between 10 and 20, and did that math and came up with a number closer to the stated goal of 500,000. And as you also heard from Ellen's comments in the Zoom meeting that you just witnessed, that 500,000 was arbitrary, based on some very identifiable trustee concerns about the church that should be addressed. And many people already refer to it as the heating and cooling part. And other things that would improve the church and make it more comfortable and welcoming to people who are not attending this church now. No, I think, and then Norma skimmed over the last 3 pages of the report that you have in your hand, but you should take the time to read those 3 pages and think about what they're saying about the church and what the church could be, and have a more complete understanding of that narrative section. I'd like to open the floor up for people to make comments and questions at this time. And I'd also like those of us that are here that participated in the Zoom meeting to come forward and stand up here with me so we can answer those questions intelligibly. If one of us doesn't remember, maybe someone else will. So, Rich, Pastor, Ellen, come on up.
Are we saying then that if we do go ahead with it, that at the end of 3 years, this thing would be paid for, whatever we decide to do? Or, I mean, how does that, I know a concern of some of us is that we're all getting older, and we've said we'd give this much for 3 years, but what happens at the end of 3 years? Is it still going to take more money beyond that? I don't understand how that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our intent is to raise the capital campaign money over the course of 3 years. We are not going to wait until the end of the campaign to invest in those things that trustees have identified and that you have identified and have become priorities for the church. As the money comes in, I think, and as we reach the levels that'll fund those projects, we'll proceed with those projects.
Okay. We are the church. The average age of the church is going up, and I was thinking that in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, will there be enough congregation to keep the church running? This is a very large building. A lot of it's not being used, like the upstairs. I was wondering, instead of putting a lot of money into this building, would it be feasible to look into selling this property and getting a smaller property, a smaller church?
When churches are looking at, aging and facilities, sometimes we tend to say, look at us, we all look so old. Forgetting that the opportunity to reach out to younger families is always in front of us. So we tend to put a stop on it. What can we do looking at the we are now? Rather than the possibility, the probability of bringing in young families, the family that was seated in the back today, those who participate. Look at the 12 children we talked about who came forward for a children's message one Sunday. Yeah, the 7 today. We need to be very careful, and I do it myself, that we don't limit ourselves with what we see in front of us, but we have the opportunity to be in prayer and to look forward. What could we do as we move forward? As we're not just going to wait if we choose to go with the program. We're not just going to wait until we get the heating, air conditioning fixed. We've got opportunities to be in ministry from the moment we walk out of these doors this afternoon. So keeping a hopeful attitude about it, and as well as addressing Ed's concerns, is the building feasible? Would we do better off in a different facility that we can afford? So my move on this is being hopeful and being prayerful. And what is God calling us to do to be in ministry in our community?
So there's a couple of things I wanted to say. One is, Mildred, in answer to your question, I am going to take a leap here and speak on behalf of the trustees. So any trustees that are here, if you disagree with what I'm saying, please speak up. But the 200,000 and more would be great that we had identified on trustees as needed to do some kind of essential repairs and rehabilitation and updates. The idea is that as that money comes in, we would do those projects, and when we got to the end of 3 years, we will ideally have spent less than came in, and we would have some cushion for future repairs, but that we would not take on any debt. We wouldn't have any outstanding bills at the end of that time. Does that answer your question? Okay. And I also wanted to just really quickly say, Ed, about your question, selling the building and looking for a smaller facility is always something that could be considered. I think that would be a struggle for us. This is just my personal opinion. I am not speaking on behalf of the trustees, but I still have a great deal of emotional attachment to this building. And I don't know how that would go over with other people, but that would be another church-wide conversation and discussion. That's certainly not something the trustees would ever be able to move forward with or want to move forward without consensus on that. And also I wanted to say, if any of you, so one of the questions you didn't hear me ask Norma, thank you, on the Zoom was, I said to her, the trustees, the 6 of us sat and created a capital improvements plan. I seem to be popping a lot. Created a capital improvements plan, but that doesn't mean, we've always considered that plan a living document. So I brought copies of sort of just a list of the projects that we had identified that we would want to use money from the capital campaign to address. And actually the very first thing on the list isn't even HVAC, it's an informational center of some kind in the narthex where people could be updated on how things are going and what's being done. And the very next thing is the heating and cooling for the rest of the building that isn't the sanctuary or the chapel or the office. And so if anybody is interested in seeing that list, and I asked Norma on the call, my impression was that at some point, Horizons, if we were to move forward with them, would help us have a broader conversation so that if there are things that the trustees missed in our list that matter a lot to other people, that those things would get introduced and put on the agenda of the trustees. And she said, yes, that's something Horizons would help lead with if we were to move forward with them. But I do have the list here of projects the trustees had identified. We had sort of put them in, it was a combination of priority and budget order, what we felt like it would take to do this phase and then this phase. That kind of got rearranged when we did the big sections of the roof and got new membrane roofing over all the big areas of the roof. But if anybody wants to see that list, I have it here.
On that list, do you have solar panels?
Please give him the microphone so everybody hears the question.
My question was whether you consider solar panels. Our electric bill at our house used to be average $350 a month. We put solar panels on our house, got a rebate from the government, and plus we got very low interest rates when we didn't need to put any of our money down up front. And our average electric bills went from $350 to about $10 a month. And so that might be a consideration. I know we talked about not even air conditioning this room because electricity was so expensive.
So that's interesting, Ed. You're the second person to ask me that question in the last 2 weeks. So that actually is not something the trustees had discussed, and it's not on the list. But that doesn't mean, you know, like I said, this list is a living document. So thank you.
I have a little different question to ask instead of money. It's because of the aging population and because more of the people that are very active here do not live in the area, it becomes more difficult for some of us, well, not me now, but I would think it would be more difficult to staff some of these things. Part of the purpose of doing this was maybe to encourage other things, other groups to be here. If anyone else is going to be in the building, there has to be other people here to let them in, out. There was going to be more maintenance, those kind of things. I just want to make sure that I was saying some negative things on my response to this, but it was not necessarily because of the money. It was because of who are the personnel that we're leaving this responsibility to. Some of us are not driving that much anymore, and so we're not coming over here to do the things that need to be done. Is that my question clear enough?
A very, very good question, Lois. Good comments, you know. And we look around and we say, okay, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? One of the benefits of improvements is having new folk come in who connect with the congregation, and as we, you know, trust them and both, receive them into membership and participation. One of the things I had shared, we talk about the Wednesday night youth group that comes, and when Shelby is able to get that going for us, and someone had made the comment, well, they're not members of the church. I said, those very same kiddos will not be a member of the church, but they may be in a car full of other kiddos driving down Gibson one day, and they'll look and they'll say, oh, look, there's my church. As we are able to make improvements on the building to make the building more usable, it's just kind of a turnaround, you know. We've got to pray about that investment so that we can be available to bring in folks, as Lois says, as we age out, to bring in new folks to come in. It's cyclical, and it just revolves and it keeps going. Part of our prayer is, you know, do we want that to be a part of life here at CUMC? So, Charles.
Just had a couple of questions. Appreciate the people who have done the good work on this, Ellen and Tom and Pastor. She mentioned on the video that I was taking notes. Norma, I think is her name, mentioned that we show some positive factors. She mentioned one conditional one that needed further discernment, and that's what I wrote down. And do y'all remember what that conditional one was? Maybe. Anyway, just a clarification on that. And I may have it in my notes somewhere. And the second question I have is, assume we go forward and we generate 350,000 or 400,000 in a 3-year period. We get a lot of the work done, air conditioning and the heating unit. Does that 350 and 400,000, does that include the fees, additional fees that we'll have to pay Horizon to help manage this capital campaign, or is that a certain percentage of our collections? That one I'm not sure.
Thank you. So that's actually something I learned in this process of working with Horizons. They consider it unethical to charge fees based on a percentage of what money gets raised. So it's a flat fee to work with them. We have paid them $8,300 to take us through the feasibility study portion of this exploration. If we move forward with them helping us do the capital campaign for the next 3 years, we will pay them an additional, if we move forward, this is an if, we will pay them an additional $15,700. That's what we would pay them. That's it. I mean, I don't mean to say that like that's a small amount. I mean, like, there's no additional amount we pay based on how much we raise or anything like that. It is a flat fee. Did that answer your question? Am I missing something?
Mostly, but with that 15,000, that come out of the 350,000 that we collect?
That, whether that comes out of the 350,000 that we collect is up to us, right? I mean, if we decide to use money from some other source, we can use money from some other source. I don't know. I assume the initial $8,300 that we have already paid them, we paid them in 2 installments. I assume the $15,700 would also be paid in installments. Oh, 3 installments, Tom says. So we would have to figure out where that money was going to come from, especially that initial payment.
One of the benefits of working with Horizons is, should we decide to go forward with it, they come in and they take on, from that point on, they guide us through the process. They have staff members, Norma, and then other staff members who will guide us. We're not having to create, okay, now what are we going to do? They come in. That's part of the benefit of the $15,000 that we will pay them to conduct the capital campaign for us. So we're not trying to come up with it out of our back pocket, no pun intended, but you know, we're not trying to do all the work. We're paying them to guide us through the capital campaign, and their success rate is fabulous. They've worked with huge churches, they've worked with churches smaller than we are, but their success rate is such that should we go forward with it, we're going to get a big benefit out of it.
Well, what is that process? You mentioned the process. Are they going to advertise, or what is this process? How are they going to help us?
Yeah, it is, it's involved in, if I can come to the right page of it. They will come in and they will guide us. They will have individuals. We'll be doing the work. We'll be doing the copying, you know, the paper, that kind of thing. But they will guide us in holding the meetings and the conversations that need to be had. It says once the campaign is initiated, it'd be a strong emphasis on continuing to pursue gifts, financial gifts. I did some percentages of the 34 people that filled out, that sent in a questionnaire, and we have approximately 50 in worship. That leaves another, say, 18% of individuals who did not respond to the questionnaire. So that there are others out there that may still have questions, that may be all on board, we just haven't heard from them. So that's one of the things that Norma does. Number 5 on the very back page, page 14, produce an abundance of good, clear communication in all forms that causes the congregation to understand God's vision for CUMC, and its effectiveness in the mission is based on the active obedience to God's individuals, how God is calling us in our lives. So they will guide us forward in continuing to have the conversations once we decide to go for this, if that's the way we go.
I also am just standing here thinking, you know, that might be an interesting thing for us to contact Norma and ask for a more detailed explanation of what Horizons would do if they were leading us in a capital campaign. I'd like to see that. I don't remember a real clear description of their role. I mean, their role, but like specifically what are they saying they will do? What are we paying them $15,700 to do?
I have another question.
I mean, if we just need more money, you know, to me that seems pretty easy. I can give more money. I just, yeah, it seems like a lot of money for
She was just saying that seems like a lot of money if we're just asking people for more money. Like, it'd be good to have a clearer description, I think is what you're saying. If we're going to pay them, we should know what we're agreeing to pay them to do.
My comment is going to be on page 2. In the congregational trends with the pledges and so forth. Well, first of all, we know in 2022 that the pledges were not zero. When we look at the trend from 22 to 24, it is a little downward trend in amount given. We don't have 2025, and we've lost some very important people during this past year. So if we were to go forward with a campaign to a capital campaign, that's also going to make sure that we keep this part okay for our other pledges, and also that we collect more to replace what's not being there.
Nothing much, really. For one thing, for 2022, I think we have to realize we did not have a pledge campaign that year. I have all the cards and the statistics and all. So for that one, it didn't. We were still rebounding from COVID, I think. And that impacted how we did much of that. And I do have the 2025 pledge amounts, but we also have to realize that even for this year, we have dropped anticipated for the remainder of the year, 8,500 in what was originally pledged to what is now pledged. There were some changes in there.
Other comments and questions? Okay, so I think the plan right now, I mean, we planned it to this far, but what we want to do is disseminate what the trustees have discovered, but we also need to collect from you your ideas about what should be funded in a capital campaign. So I think our next step will be for us to devise some way that you can communicate what you think should be done. Then the list has to be prioritized, and
Tom, I guess my question is, here we are, we've done this survey. I don't want us just to drag on and on. Either we make a decision to go with the capital campaign, or we say, no, that's not right for us now. So how do we do that?
I believe we have 30 days to decide, and then we'll have to have a charge conference to vote on it. But that 30 days runs us bump up against Easter. So we do have a little bit of grace in that. I think right after Easter, we'll have a congregational gathering to vote to go forward with that. Once we do that, we need to have as soon as possible a charge conference, because it is a large expense of finances to go forward with that. And then from there, can we get that clarification from Norma about what exactly we're going to be paying for with our $15,000 as we go along?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. That came up at this meeting right here, this idea of finding out from Norma in more detail what we would be paying $15,700 for, which I think is important.
Why is there a 30-day deadline to make a decision? Does that mean that if we don't make the decision by 30 days, Horizon just says that's it?
Somehow I doubt they'd be quite that abrupt in their severing of the possibilities. But I think it's partly because of momentum, like this idea of having the conversation, gathering ideas. If we're going to do it, we need to move forward and do it. If we're not going to do it, we need to know that too, and then the trustees need to figure out a different plan. And so I believe our actual deadline is the 29th of April, I think. And so we have a little more than 30 days because of Easter and all the busyness of Easter. And I'd like to see us get the information from Norma that we're going to ask for and get that out to people. And also I'd like to see us devise a way for people to have input on if they look at this list the trustees had come up with and they think other things are important, for us to be able to edit that list as trustees, to be able to edit that list. So, and also we wanted everybody to have time to think about this and pray about this. And I know, do we have a prayer team? Yeah, I had asked Adrienne on the call if we could, on the Zoom with Norma, if we could organize a group of people who are willing to pray faithfully as we make this decision. Pray over, I mean, I would hope all of us are going to be praying about the church and the future of the church and this decision of whether or not to move forward with a capital campaign. But I believe that in this church we have prayer warriors. And I would love to see some prayer warriors who are willing to daily pray over this decision and the future of our church. And so if you're willing to do that, please talk with Adrienne. She said she would organize that group. And that's all I have to say about that.
When we're all praying about it is one thing, but having an intentional group to pray is the important part. What do you got?
Yeah, when we get an answer on what exactly will Horizon do on the capital campaign, I'd appreciate if they could include it on the podium out here in the foyer so we can read it at our leisure. And having this out there too, you know, what the trustees did would help. Thank you.
Well, this is, you know, it's so important, and may not need to say it, but it's so important that we are open. Everybody has a say-so in our conversation, because this affects all of us. If we go forward with it, it affects all of us in the back pocket, if you will. But it's just an opportunity for us to pray about how God would want us to continue our mission, our presence here in the area. So. Any others? Any other questions? So our goal is to, by, I believe, April the 29th, is to come together and make a decision. In the meantime, we will get hold of Norma and get a list of exactly what our $15,400 is going to be going to, so that we will know that we're going to get a bang out of our buck, because that's what it's about. It's how do we be the church, you know, go out and be the church. How do we be the church in this whole process?
And is it an option to go ahead without Norman's help?
It would be an option for us to continue as a congregation, letting the trustees do the work that needs to be done as we are able to do it. I think the advantage of going forward with the $300,000 is we're guaranteed the funds and we'll be able to get the work done, as opposed to, do we have enough money to fix this? Are we going to be able to fix that? Yes, ma'am. We are guaranteed Norma and Horizon's work in collecting those funds. That's the whole. You know, we're not guaranteed $300,000, no, but we're guaranteed their work in guiding us in getting the funds, as opposed to what happens in so many congregations, the trustees working on it, and then it goes to the ad council, and then it gets discussed, and in the meantime, we run the risk of deterioration of the building. So.
What occurs to me is some of us that have questions about how helpful she really would be, maybe are not the trustees that are doing the most work on it. So I would think we have to be very careful if we say she's not worth it, because the trustees, if they feel it's worth it, it's important that they have that.
I think if I'm being really honest, the trustees are a mixed bag about how we feel about it. So I don't think we have a consensus within the trustees.
Yeah. Thus the desire and the need for an intentional prayer team, that we can be praying about it. Yeah. So, any other questions? It's big. It's big. It's big. So we want to hear from God and how God would guide us to do this. We need to do the repairs one way or the other. So is this the way God is guiding us to, or is there another option as we continue on? So, any other concerns? Thank you all for being here. You know, we are the body of Christ. We are the church. And we have that opportunity to continue to. Can I share a thought that I had? We're talking about gaining money. Just real quick. You know how many food trucks we have around town? One of the churches in Gallup, I remember, huge parking lots like we have. They opened up their parking lots once a month to food trucks to come in and set up. And yeah, there's a mess. You're going to have, you know, tortilla wrappers everywhere, you know, kinds of. But then they collected. They didn't charge a rent, but they just asked the food truck vendor to donate 10% of their receipts for that day to the church. What a fabulous way of putting CUMC back on the map. You know, you come down here, and then we have the opportunity of being, you know, hey, people drive by like this young man in the car and say, oh, that's my church. Well, the young guy in the car say, oh, yeah, that's where we got those burritos. You know, it's putting us on the map. And then it's going to require us to create and be in participation in the ministries that we can offer. So, yeah, it's wide open. We are working on getting the wiring for the sound, for the sign, so that we can start managing it again. The work that was done up above the old part of the buildings, the wiring had to be redone. And so we are working, Dale is doing a great job at getting that all set up for us. I have the controls to work the sign. I'm in contact with the company to see if I can do it from my computer rather than going out there and standing in front of the sign with this little, you know, little control thing, A, oh no, not A, B, B, you know. So yeah, that is in the process because that also draws attention to us. Every time we have a veterans parade coffee, that draws attention to us. Every time we put out a sign and say we have clothes giveaway, that brings attention to us. It's where we are prepared to then move with individuals who come to us in ministry.
I hadn't intended to say anything, but I will. 3-strand electric will be here Thursday as of our question right now. I'm digging a trench to put new conduit off the roof to the sign to get it power. I refuse to pay that kind of money, $100 an hour, whatever, to a company to send a guy with a lot of overhead to dig a trench. I worked on it yesterday, and I hope I'll finish it probably Monday or Tuesday. And I'll give them pictures and so on, because I've been in touch with the owner of 3-strand, Michael Cordova, and have an appointment set up for Thursday. It may be able to come earlier if I get the trench done earlier. So hopefully, given that it may not be perfect on Thursday and get completely hooked up, within a week or so, we'll have power to the sign. That's an update on that.
Thank you all for being attentive, for being here. It shows your heart for the church and how God is calling us to be the light of Christ, the beacon here in our area. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll go on to other things for the day. Father, we give you thanks that we can be your presence here in the world. So many fabulous things have happened throughout the past of this congregation, and it's our desire to continue that momentum of bringing your light and your love. Thank you for all who have dedicated their hearts, dedicated their lives, dedicated their finances to the ministries here at Christ United Methodist Church. Help us to continue to dedicate our lives for your service so that others can come to know you and your love. We give you all the praise as you take us safely from this place on to other things. In Jesus' name, amen.